Welcome to 1010 Analytics. In this video, we'll be talking about what is bias, what is variance, what the different levels of bias and variance look like, and how the bias-variance trade-off relates to overfitting and underfitting. And all of this is in relation to error handling in supervised learning. So what is bias? Bias measures how far off predicted values are from the actual values. So for example, if you've got high bias, it would mean that predicted values are consistently far off from the actual values. And this would mean that the model is not complex enough, it's too simple. And if you've got low bias, it would mean that the predicted values are close to the actual values. And what is variance? Variance measures how far spread out the predicted values are. So if you've got high variance, it would mean that the predicted values are spread out over a wide range. And low variance would mean that the predicted values are hovering around a certain value with a very narrow spread. Now let's take a look at how the different levels of bias and variance look like. So the ideal scenario is low variance and low bias. So in the image on the right side, the top left part is with low bias and low variance. So here you can see that all the points are centered on the target and there's a very narrow spread. They're all around the same area on the target. So a nice example I like to give is that imagine a student is studying for an exam and student has all the material provided by the professor regarding the main concepts, and the student is a very good student. The student studies everything the professor has taught and actually understands the concept. So whenever the professor asks the question on the exam, by kind of varying the wording a little just to try to trick the student is smart and has understood the concept, so is able to apply whatever the student has learned and give the right answer regardless of how the professor words it differently. And now let's look at low variance and high bias. This is the image on the top right. So you can see here that the points, they are consistently away from the target. However, they are still centered around the same area. So this would be that the student has studied for the exam. However, the student studied the wrong answer, but the student fundamentally believes that the wrong answer is the right answer. So regardless of how the professor words the question, the student will consistently give that wrong answer. And what about high variance and low bias? That is the bottom left image. So here you can see that the points are still kind of hovering around the target. However, they are spread out a little more. So we've got high variance. So this would be that student has studied for the exam. However, the student memorized the answers word for word for each of the questions. So the student did not understand the underlying concept. So whenever the professor worded the question a little differently, the student got confused and started giving different answers every time. Now what about high variance and high bias? This would be that a student just takes wild guesses all the time and most of them are wrong. It's the bottom right image. Now, how does the bias-variance trade-off relate to overfitting and underfitting? So first of all, bias-variance trade-off can be thought of as a compromise or a balance between bias and variance. So ideally, models should be able to detect all the underlying patterns in the training data while generalizing well to unseen data at the same time. So usually when you decrease the variance, the bias increases, and vice versa. So in the image at the bottom, you can see that if you've got high variance, the points are all fitted perfectly by the line. The student has studied it word for word and has not understood the underlying pattern. That is overfitting. And the next is underfitting, where there's very high bias, which means that the student just understood the completely wrong concept, did not understand. And there you can see it's underfit. And the good balance is when the student has understood the concept and is able to apply it whenever asked. Alright, if you found this video helpful, consider subscribing to this channel, because in case I upload something interesting that might catch your eye. Thank you very much.